Hi, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We are now episode 4 of the Hebrew podcast, and Stephanie is joining us again. And today we're talking about the similarities between different Hebrew letters and why they're similar. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I think it's so great to have a podcast on this because a lot of the letters look very alike. So I think a lot of people are going to benefit from that. I wanted to start off by talking about our vet. A lot of students mix these up because, one's got a dot and one doesn't. Bet has a belly button and vet does not. So it had to go to the vet. And so then they remember, okay, vet's got the dot, but vet doesn't because it had to go to the vet. Cough and chaf. Cough has our cough drop that's going to help us stop coughing. And then we have our half, which is our backwards C. So we have a cough drop and we have the backwards C. So I think, what's really great about the Hebrew primer book that we work with is that they have a search and circle. And so they might have like a whole bunch of vets written on there and then one bet, and you have to find the one that's different so you can identify the differences between the letters. I know that in Teach Yourself to Read Hebrew, they talk about, like, oh, these look very similar, but they we have to be careful when we're reading them. So they might have like a bet, then a vet, then a bet, then a vet. So you have to like switch back and forth with identifying which letters it is. Our hey, chet. So if we look here, our hey and our chet, we have this little like part that's not connected, where it's connected here. And we have a little like line that goes like past up here too, which makes it a little different. And this sticks out here where it didn't come up here and it didn't stick out here. But man, they sure look similar. For hey, we draw like a lowercase h here and connect that line coming up to make that. And then chet, chet, we have spell its name. C H. I draw a little line in here, make like a capital E, and then we have a T. And top, it has a toe.
Is there a reason why that one has a dot and one doesn't?
Rabbi Michael Moskowitz reporting for what happens in Hebrew letters and why sometimes they have dots in them and why they don't. A dot is a dagesh in Hebrew. And why the taf sometimes has that dot in it or doesn't, which in sometimes Hebrew we call it a saf. Why that exists is because it might have been two letters a long, long time ago. And when those two letters got combined, they put a dot in there to represent it. Today in Hebrew, we read it the same, whether it's got a dot in it or not, because that's how Israelis do it, basing it on the Hebrew of the Sephardic world. In the Ashkenazic world, they used to say if it had a dot in it, it was a T sound. If it didn't have a dot in it, it was an S sound. And that's why you hear people say Shabbat versus Shabbos, and the different sound of the T versus the S. But that sometimes is why dots, the dagesh, will be in Hebrew letters. We see it in gimels, we see it in bets and vets, we see it in other times too. It's called the beged kefet effect of our 6 Hebrew letters where it might fall into.
I find that learning these tricks helps us distinguish between the two. Another one that students mix up are resh and dalet. So if I were to cover that up right there, they look like the same letter, but The difference is that Dalit has this little tail sticking out here. Oops, I erased that, but it's supposed to be there. And so we have to help us remember which one's which. I say Resh is a backwards R. And if you work with another one of my helpers in class, he says Resh rolls around the corner here. We also have for Dalit, I say, you know, that remember we talked about that little tail that sticks out. Duh, it has a tail. So we get that duh sound that Dalit makes. If you work with one of my other helpers in the classroom, he'll say Dalit divides into two lines, the one that you draw going across and the one that you draw going down. We also have these three. So we've got mem, final mem, and samech. And so we look at mem and final mem. The difference is that, you know, that final mem is filled in right there. And then when we look at final mem and samech, sorry, they're not drawn like perfectly, but they look very similar. The only thing is mem's like a flat bottom and samech has this curvy bottom. And so I say that samech smiles. Yeah, there's the smile that it makes. And mem and final mem are kind of boxy letters. And so we kind of draw them as a box on our stomach and say, so we know what sound they make. These two are ones that a lot of my students kind of know coming into class because they played the dreidel game, but I wanted to put them on here just in case. So we have our nun and our gimel. And the difference between the two is that Gimel's got a tail and Nun has no tail right there. So I always circle that for them, right? Gimel's got a tail and Nun has no tail. Okay, so then these look very similar too. We've got our Vav and our Zion. So man, what's the difference here? This little part at the end that's sticking out. So I always have my students draw for Vav, have them draw the V, and then the one that sticks out a little bit more is going to have a little stick out at the end, but we're going to have our Z for Zion, our little Z zigzag. And then we have our shin and sin, and all that's different here is the placement of the dot. So we talk about, well, this one's our sin. Sin, if you sin, you didn't do the right thing. So the dot's not on the right. And so that's how we distinguish between the two here. Oh, the dot's on the right here. That must be our shin.
Thank you for joining. We'll have more next week. Thank you. And thanks for joining.
Thanks, Max.
You're welcome.